Hello, everybody. My name's James. Welcome to episode 10 of Planet FPL Correspondent Week. And as I hit the halfway point, I've got a debutant. Let me please introduce you to our new Manchester United correspondent. It's Alex Trembath. Hey, Alex.
I'm very well, thanks, James. Always a pleasure to talk to you. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Thank you, mate. Firstly, I must shout out, obviously, Mr. Gary Robinson, who obviously could not handle losing the Europa League final and has decided he's not going to do it anymore. That's not his reasoning. He has passed the baton over to Alex. For those who don't know you, mate, who are you?
Yeah, my name's Alex Trembath. I am a lifelong Man United fan for my sins, and that's going back to the pre Premier League champions era. So I think my earliest memories of a United fan were Clayton Blackmore scoring a ridiculous free kick against Montpellier in the Cup Winners' Cup in 1990 to 91 season.
Semi final?
Um, was it the semi or the quarter? Now I can't quite remember. We ended up beating Barcelona 2-1 in the
Yeah.
final. But yeah, those was my. So if people ask me like my favourite moments as a United fan, Steve Bruce's brace against Sheffield Wednesday, because that was kind of what sealed us our first Premier League title, our first title for 26 years. So I lived in Manchester for a while. I had a season ticket in the mid 2000s. But other than that, also I'd like to say a quick word of tribute to Gary, who was actually an old friend of mine, the outgoing correspondent. I actually went to watch a lot of United games with him when I was living in Manchester, and we were at uni together. I've got a lot of respect for his United views and his realism. But what you might get from me is a little bit more optimism sprinkled with a healthy portion of delusion at the same time, I suppose. So yeah. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I've been playing FPL since the mid 2000s again, but only really as an engaged player for the last 4 years. I like planning and spreadsheets and looking at fixtures and the kind of stuff that you're into as well, James. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Let's talk about them fixtures then. Are they good? Are they rough? I mean, looking at sort of Arsenal, City, Chelsea, all inside the first five.
So when the fixtures first landed, I think I had the same reaction that a lot of people did, that it's not ideal. But having had time to absorb everything, there are a few things I want to point out on the fixtures. So there are three particular blocks of fixtures for us that I think are interesting for FPL. One is that we have a stretch between, I think it's like game week 9 and game week 21, which is a 13 game run where we don't play any of last season's top four. And actually, if you go back slightly earlier from game week 6, if like, for example, if someone's wildcarding around game week 6 or 7, if you're willing to bench our assets in game week 8 against Liverpool, we've also got Brentford 6 and Sunderland in 7. So there's a really long stretch there. But what I think is also interesting about that stretch is one of the advantages that people have been talking about with Man United this season is the fact that we don't have European football. And that's perhaps an edge over Newcastle, Villa, Forest, Palace, etc. And the fact that in that stretch, when we have good fixtures, that's when we play a lot of the sides who I think are in European competition but don't quite have the squads to deal with it. So, for example, Palace in game week 13, playing them on a weekend when they've had a Thursday fixture. Spurs in game week 11. I know you've had recent injury
I knew
news.
you were going to get there.
And that's immediately after Champions League week. Forest the week before that, we play them just before they've got a European fixture. Then maybe by the time we play Villa and Newcastle in game week 17 and 18, they'll have some hope. Maybe they'll have some issues from having to use their squad. And the other fixtures we have through that spread are like Brighton, Everton, West Ham, Wolves, Bournemouth, Wolves again, Leeds, Burnley. So I think it's a really, really interesting stretch. But then coming to those fixtures at the beginning, which I think is the other interesting stretch, my initial reaction was, yeah, it's going to be really tough. But then I think there is going to be a real ambition to come out of the blocks quickly. We're seeing high levels of intensity in pre-season. I think we're seeing things that are beginning to click a lot more with what Amarim's trying to do. I quite fancy that first fixture at home to Arsenal. And I think it's not the worst time to have those fixtures. I think it's game week 1, 4, and 5 when we have Arsenal, City, Chelsea. Because I think I'd rather play those teams then, because they're the teams I think have got the squads to deal with the European fixtures a bit better later. And I quite like that we've got them near the beginning. And what did we see last season? I think the better performances under Amarim were in some of those bigger fixtures. So away at Anfield, home against Arsenal, I think were some of the best performances we turned out. And also, there are some good fixtures in there as well. We're the only team who has two of the promoted teams at home in the first 7 games. So I think there is a case, and we'll talk about assets later, but I think there is a case to begin with some United assets. The third block of fixtures that I think is interesting is the AFCON period, because obviously we've got Bryan Mbeumo and Amad Diallo both going to AFCON. So that's when you might find players like even Mason Mount potentially becoming interesting around that period, because obviously everyone's getting their 5 free transfers in game week 16. There are some decent fixtures for us in that stretch, particularly the Wolves, Leeds, Burnley in game week 19, 20, 21. So yeah, the fixtures, I think I'm feeling quite positive now about how they've panned out.
Right. So clearly you haven't looked at the fixtures much, Alex.
Ha. Yeah, as I said, I always like to plan ahead.
That's a great analysis, mate. I think yeah, what's really interesting about now, I think a few people got eyes on it. Is even you mentioned obviously the two home games that really stand out quite early on against Burnley in 3 and Sunderland in 7. And he's almost looking at those 2 weeks and seeing Salah's got Arsenal and Chelsea respectively, and even looking at them from going Mo, maybe don't want to captain in those two, and United will stand out. So yeah, it's some really interesting aspects. You mentioned about teams who are obviously going to play over this run that got European commitments around, which is quite handy for you. One of them, my team, kept 7 clean sheets last season, Alex, against English sides. 3 of them were against your team, mate. It's not a good percentage. I take it these two new signings of Cunha and Mbeumo are going to help with that, are they?
Well, that is the hope. Um, let's talk about each of them one at a time, I guess, because I think they're quite. I think they'll fit in quite differently. The expectation is that Cunha and Mbumbo will fit into those kind of left-sided 10 and right-sided 10 roles. I think it's a little bit clearer for me with Cunha that I expect him to have that kind of left-sided 10 pretty much nailed down. I'll just sort of step back a moment though and say Cunha for me is I can't remember the last time I was so excited about United signing. I think, like you will know from our previous conversations, like even well before we were linked with him, I've rated him as a player for a long time. I think he is tailor made for this system. He's been playing in a very similar role under Vitor Pereira at Wolves. He brings something that we've been lacking. We've been trying to crowbar sort of the wide forward sort of winger type players into that role, but what he brings is sort of that ability to drive with the ball, drop in deep, drift out wide, create space. I think he'll be very good for other players in an FPL sense as well. In particular, I have in mind whoever ends up being the 9 for us. The fact that so Cunha in his first game in pre-season, our first one of the 4 summer games was against Leeds, and there were some instances where you saw him like drawing the defenders out and making space. It was Chido Obi actually started as the 9 in that game. And there was just a moment there where like you saw Cunha pull the defender out and then get the ball into OB in behind. And also Dorgu as well, I think as the who I think will be the preferred left wing back. We'll talk about him later, but I can see an understanding building between those two, and I think that like Dorgu's ability to make those kind of get aggressively really high up, overlapping runs, and when Cunha pulls out wide, you'll see Dorgu come inside a bit as well. I think I can see Cunha being very good for him as an asset as well. Cunha is the player I see as being more explosive and, to use the word talismanic, he's not going to be on penalties at United, but I think he has an ego, and I think one of the reasons he's chosen to come to United is he sees the ability for him to come in and be the star of the show here. And whereas with Mbeumo, I'm thrilled with that signing as well. I see him being more of like his work rate, his pressing, is what he does off the ball. He's very creative as well. He got one of the highest XA in the Premier League last season. But I see Cunha having the greater goal threat, perhaps. I don't think Mbeumo is going to be as he was at Brentford. I think he will have some set pieces, for example, but he's clearly going to at best share those with Bruno Fernandes. And also, I think we might see a bit more fluidity with Mbeumo in terms of how his role will fit in on that side. I think sometimes we might see him playing at wing back even, and because there's Amad Diallo to think about. Diallo before his injury last season was playing 90 minutes most games in the right 10 role. Maybe we'll see Mbeumo play in the 9 sometimes, especially if we don't sign one. But I think that's all very unclear. What we did see a little bit, so before Mbeumo, and I know we'll talk about Ahmad a bit later as well, but um, in that again in that first game against Leeds, Ahmad was playing as the right wing back, and I think Toby Collier in the first half was actually playing as the right 10. But you saw Ahmad coming in a lot and coming into the spaces of the right 10 role, especially when we're on the ball a lot more. And I think there'll be quite a bit of fluidity between Mbeumo and Ahmad on that side. That could potentially compromise them both as FPL assets, although I think they'll probably both chip in plenty with returns. But yeah, for me, Cunha is the standout FPL pick of the two new signings.
You saved me the question there, mate. And I have to say, in terms of Cunha versus Bumo specifically, I agree. I'm trying to kind of put my finger on why it is that I thought Bumo would come in priced more. If he was still that price at Brentford, I'd be very interested. Yeah, it doesn't feel right to me at the moment. And you used word ego, Cunha. The word I was thinking was aura. I think he feels like a Manchester United player to me. I think that's why you're really excited as a fan about what will happen next. The sort of player that will carry a moment for you, like Fernandes has many on many occasions, but different in terms of more like the speed, in terms of the quickness in which he'll do things, his explosive nature. Yeah, Cunha over Bumo feels right to me as well, mate.
And yeah, and I guess something I would add to that as well is that Cunha, when he was at Wolves, showed himself to be quite fixture proof. I mean, you remember last year that Wolves had that great run of fixtures from game week 10 onwards. I made the decision that season to go with him a bit early. He ticked along fine, like he's got a goal against Villa. The previous season, like hat trick against Chelsea, he's popped up off. He scored against Liverpool last season. If I were to invest in Cunha, I'd be happy playing him in pretty much any game. Um, and yeah, I haven't seen him in many drafts, but I have seen Florian Wirtz in a lot of drafts. And I think there may be a question for people there that if you make a zero point 0.5 saving, depending on what you can do with that, maybe that's where the question might arise.
Or you wouldn't have heard my conversation with Sergio on Patreon on a debrief podcast episode 2, because at the time we're recording, it's not even available. But yeah, Cunha was in for me 2 weeks ago. Took him out ahead of this week. He's very much currently in my thinking. I was already considering different moves that involved going Cunha rather than Bruno Fernandes. Because Bruno Fernandes, I want to tell everyone, was in my draft before FPL review launched. I've said this quite a lot at the start when the pricing came out. I do want to go Cunha. I think it feels like a want pick. It feels like a want pick. Fernandes in at 9. What do you think the justification is for him to be a million more than Cunha and Bumo, and yet why is it still a consideration?
Well, what I would say with Bruno Fernandes, it might come down to your level of risk appetite. Because I think Bruno Fernandes for an extra million, what you're really getting there is the dependability, penalties, probably most set pieces. And I think so. There are question marks about his role because it's even clear now from the preseason games there isn't a settled role for him in the side. He's sometimes playing that deeper sort of playmaker role. He's sometimes playing in that he's played a couple of games of preseason in the 10 roles. As I say, we're probably expecting Cunha and Mbeumo to play there, but I think it will still be mixed and matched a little bit. What I did look at was Bruno Fernandes last season and one, his distribution of returns when he played in central mid versus higher in the 10, and also his defensive contributions. And it was actually a little bit more evenly spread than I was expecting. In fact, one of his best runs in terms of FPL returns was I think it was game week 27 to 29 last season when we played Ipswich, Arsenal, Leicester, and he got, I think it was like 2 goals, 4 assists in that run, playing from central midfield. He often got the defensive contributions when in games when he was playing in the 10 role as well. So I think regardless of where he's playing, you can expect him to get returns. And obviously, I know there may have been adjustments to the BPS system, but whenever he does get a return, he is the kind of player who's likely to get on the bonus as well. And yeah, so for the kind of FPL managers who want something that's a little bit more dependable, he's probably just going to play 90 minutes every game. I think that is the justification.
His reliability from that perspective is unbelievable that he's barely missed a game for you since he joined you, and that's back in 2019.
Yeah,
2019-20 season, just before COVID, wasn't it?
yeah, and I guess the caveat that is that he is 30 years old now. I think I've got that right. He's around that age anyway. So maybe at some point we start to see that managed. But I think actually last season, I feel like that was his best season so far at United. In terms of his overall contribution, it was a disastrous season for us overall. But yeah, and I could see him being the kind of player who, like in the likes of Modric, for example, who could sustain his career well into his 30s, perhaps playing in a central midfield role. That's where I expect him to play mostly next season. But as I say, I mean, again, those AFCON fixtures, by the way, that run there is that run in game week 17 to 22 might be where you see him playing the 10 more because Mbeumo won't be there and Ahmad won't be there. So maybe he becomes a little bit more interesting then. But yeah,
I mean, we know what we get, right? I mean, if you look at his returns since the remarkable season when he had 32 returns in the 2021 season, last four seasons, attacking returns 17, 17, 19, 20. Although last year was the lowest for goals, but it was also his second highest ever for assists. So we know that he's near enough going to be returns one in two. You're telling us that almost irrespective of whether he's playing a deeper role or even as a 10, that he's still even in that high position capable of picking up the def cons. The reliability on his starts unquestionable. What's to say, Cunha doesn't get a rest for a more straightforward game. Although it doesn't feel necessary with a lack of European competition, but I suppose players like Mount are going to need minutes somewhere, right? Otherwise, you're never going to kind of build him back up to any sort of level. Fernandes gives you exactly what you said, the reliability. I suspect you're going to tell me though that you'd go Cunha.
Cunha is my preference. Um, but I know there are managers out there. One of your patrons, Samo Sutherland, springs to mind, the kind of manager who is goes for the safer picks. If you're the kind of FPL manager who wants reliability, that's where I think it's probably worth the extra. For me, I have a higher risk appetite. I think the upside is greater with Matheus Cunha.
But is it therefore something we should come back to, maybe in say game week 6 or something?
Potentially, it is. Game week 6 when that big run starts. But yeah, I think in general the view would be with those fixtures, it's probably a little bit more sensible overall to wait until that point with our assets. Although my feeling is I think we're going to start the season well. And again, maybe that comes down to risk appetite. Maybe that's down to some of my expectation and optimism as a fan and what I'm seeing pre-season. But yeah, I think there's a case from the beginning.
I also think as well that if I start with Cunha or Fernandez, I can't see a scenario where it's going to be Bumo for me. If I start with Cunha or Fernandez, if that choice is then to take on Salah and Haaland as well, I may well be when the captain, the one I go for in game week 3. And if it goes off just in game week 3 at home to Burnley, then it's worth it.
Yes, and I suppose looking at game week 3, as you say, there are not many other options. I mean, say if Isak somehow stays at Newcastle, then that's
Yeah.
an option. But I mean, is that look at? I mean, we're going to talk about the situation with Tesco, and I don't think you can plan for that now at the moment anyway. So it is the standout fixture for captaincy that week.
Yeah, I think at the moment, if I did go, I'd still be happy captain Salah at home to Arsenal, by the way, for those who are going there. But if I went against, didn't have Haaland either as at Brighton, and if I didn't go United attack, I think I'd just be going probably Palmer against Fulham, which doesn't scream. It's fine, but it doesn't. It is at Stamford Bridge. Doesn't scream great.
No, and yeah. So again, that's another part of the rationale. We'll talk about. I know we're going to talk about our defense later, but then it's that case of like if you want to have one of our attackers for that period, are you willing to play them in game week 1 against Arsenal, game week 4 against City, game week 5 against Chelsea? So that's the trade off.
Yeah, I think with someone like Cunha, I'd just play him. I think
I
would
personally
largely
would,
be
yeah.
my fault. Unless I had, if my 7 other attackers all had brilliant fixtures, say when you go to City in 4, yeah, sure. But I just think the way you could counter in a fixture like that might even play into like some of his better traits. So yeah, it's close for me, Cunha Fernandez. Really close because that with Fernandez, Fernandes as well. I think if you go there, you pick him unless suddenly it's like, oh, bloody hell, he is really deep and the defcons aren't coming. He's not getting the attacking returns, but you are going for more of a consistency. Cunha, if you commit to, you might feel obliged to move. But obviously, if you start with him, if you're planning a later wild card, you're thinking, well, damn, those fixtures from six are swinging. I probably want to keep him for that. You could get stuck. It's a really, really close one for me on those two. But I want one, I think. It could be none. It won't be both.
Yeah, and what you said about countering as well, like one of the things. So if you watch the Everton, even if you just go check out the highlights of our game against Everton the other night, some of the pace of transition, especially in the first half, like we look frightening at moments. Even the build up that led to the penalty, I think we're going to have a lot more threat in that regard, and especially because of the setup we'll have with the wing backs now, because we're playing with converting fullbacks to wing backs last season, and now we're going to see, I think, something that will carry a lot more threat in terms of the wing backs.
Yeah, I agree with you. I caught the first half of the game against Everton, and Fernandes, Mbeumo, and Cunha were essentially kind of a front three. It was times where it was layered, where Fernandes was sort of left of a midfield three, and it felt like Mbeumo and Cunha were up front together. There was a lot of fluidity, what was happening at the top end of the pitch, and that I think, for a fantasy perspective, makes it quite exciting in terms of rather we watched you a lot last year and everything looked quite predictable and functional. Yeah, I think we're going to get something that's a lot more fluid with United. And actually, you mentioned that penalty that you won. Obviously, that was won by Diallo. Despite the fact he was playing wing back, he got in so many dangerous, threatening positions in terms of what I saw. Should he still be a consideration? This is the old-fashioned poo. We've got a midfielder that's technically should, I guess, be sort of priced up as defender. Maybe I'm glad they've not done that, but he probably is going to play wing back predominantly. And yet it feels like we shouldn't rule him out at 6.5, should we? But he's not in the conversation with your and Dyers, Kuduses, and those others in that area. I'm not seeing him in many teams at all.
I would be cautious with him on the classification. The thing I would predict is that I think he'll be reclassified as a defender next season, because I think he is mostly going to start games as right wing back on paper. But coming back to what I said before, I think you will see him drift into central areas a bit. And yeah, and again, he's started all four of the preseason games in the US. It's only him and Bruno Fernandes, I think, that started all four games. And yeah, he's just getting in behind. We had a goal. He scored a goal that was disallowed against West Ham, where a rare, lovely piece of work on the ball from Manuel Ugarte sort of picked him out in behind. And also the goal he scored against Aston Villa on the last day of the season, where like he again drifted in behind Bruno, picked him out, and he scored. I think he's going to, over the season, notch up an amount of returns that will more than justify that 6.5 price. But I think the problem with him is I'm just not sure he's going to start every game. I think he is going to be preferred as the starting right wing back, but I do expect Diallo to get some games, and I think it will usually be on that side. I think, and we'll talk about Mount as well, I think there might be occasional games where we see Mbeumo at right wing back even, and something like Fernandes or Mount brought into the front three, because I think Mount will occasionally start games, and I feel like it's Ahmad who's potentially the most likely to come out of the side in that regard.
It's
So
also, we're saying Ahmad could obviously play as your right side of 10 as well.
well, that's where he played mostly last season. I mean,
Yeah.
before he got the injury last season, he was starting and playing pretty much 90 minutes in every game and playing as the right 10. And that's why he's been classified as a midfielder, because I guess that's the evidence that they have. So
Yeah, he played that more than wing back last year. I think the way you described it in terms of it might change next year is probably right.
well, that's what we're seeing pre-season, and I think it just makes sense. And I thought that was really interesting. Is like the pre-season game against Leeds that he started out there, and we had really strangely Toby Collier playing as the right 10 in the first half. But yeah, Ahmad is the right wing back, and I think Ahmad has started right wing back 3 of the 4 games, and the other game he started at right 10, which is maybe an indication that he may still be used there sometimes.
Okay. Just briefly on other midfielders, is there anything from that cheaper bracket? Like Kobe Mino is another one we've seen play. We've even seen him play false nine. For you, 5.0 feels like it could be interesting. Agate, from what I saw at the weekend, struggled. Casemiro is still a decent ball winner in terms of what he can pick up, and we know he's a threat from set plays as well. Is there anything from them and Toby Collier 4.5 appeal at all?
Collier, I'll say to begin with, I expect him to go out on loan.
Yeah.
Um, Minu, I just don't think we'll get the minutes to warrant him being an FPL asset. Now, Casemiro and Ugarte, I think there's a potential scenario where if we do not sign a central mid, because I think there's a very good chance we will, but if we don't sign a central midfield player, then I think in most games, probably all games, it's going to be one of those two, Casemiro or Ugarte playing. If there's an injury to one of them, then I think the other one will become interesting because they'd be very good for the defensive contributions. Casemiro was an absolute monster for them last season in the games he played. Ugarte is very good as well. And Ugarte being at 5.0, I mean, if Casemiro picks up an injury and then I think Ugarte probably starts every game if we haven't signed a midfielder. So I've got the same concerns. I thought he lost possession a lot against Everton. There have been concerns about him on the ball. There's no question about him, like in terms of when we're on the back foot and like his he's like what he offers in terms of his like the amount of ground he covers. But there are real concerns on the ball. And I think we're going to look to sign a player who's like better for ball progression. But yeah, there is a scenario where he becomes interesting. All the other way around, if he gets an injury, and Casemiro is the player that picks up those minutes.
What sort of profile kind of midfielder are you thinking? Something like Douglas Luiz feels like the sort of name that I could see you going for.
That sounds about right because we're looking for someone. So I don't know how people seem to be paying a bit less attention to what Fabrizio Romano is saying these days, but what he said a couple of days ago was that we were interested potentially in Joao Palhinha at the start of the window, but the idea is that we want someone who has that defensive ability, but also can offer more in terms of progression. Belaber at Brighton, I think, is the one that I'd really love us to get, but I don't think
That's
that
got a
happens.
cast.
Yeah, exactly. There are some other names like a Gume at Sevilla that we're being linked with. But yeah, Douglas Luiz maybe seems the most likely. And I think we will make a signing there. I think it'll be very late in the window, though.
Okay. No, it's so okay, genuine avoid. In terms of incomings as well, well documented you want a 9. Timestamp, it's Tuesday lunchtime. We don't have a clue at the moment, and Si's on the next Correspondent Week podcast as well. Ironically, I don't really have a clue what's happening with Benjamin Sesko at the time of recording. Though my suspicion is that he's going to go to Newcastle. What's your thoughts?
I'm not so sure. I can see why it looks that. I think that does look the most likely now. But the most important piece of information that we don't have is any indication from the players' camp. Newcastle, again, at the time of recording, have put in a second bid. David Ornstein has reported that. And it looks like talks are progressing between the clubs, but there is no indication from the player. It's very clear that Manchester United retain an interest. And from everything I hear, he's our first choice for the number 9. I'm not so sure about that myself, but I still think there's a potential situation where the player gives an indication that he prefers Manchester United, and we might match the bid that Newcastle have put in. It sounds like we can afford the finances of it. It's hard to cut through all the noise on our financial situation, but it seems like we would be able to get the deal done. So honestly, it all just comes down to the player, I think. But yeah, I agree with you. It looks slightly more likely at this point that Newcastle is the destination.
We know that you want a 9. Firstly, assuming one comes in, what's the impact to the 3 key midfielders behind Fernandes, Cunha, Mbeumo? What's the impact to them on fantasy if someone like Sesko joins? And what also do you foresee the impact if you didn't get one at all?
Okay, I'll unpack the first question. So if he joins, one impact is that it means I think we saw from Amorim last season, he was very reluctant to do anything other than play a sort of typical 9 in that role. It wasn't very often you saw him do something like the Everton game, where it's kind of false 9 or fluid between, as you say, Cunha and Mbeumo Fernandes played as a front 3. If we sign a Sesko, then, or if we sign another 9, I think you'll see whoever is the signing will likely be the first choice in that role. And then it may depend on what happens in terms of shifting other players out. I'd like to see us keep Rasmus Højlund, but the insinuation seems to be that if we sign a nine, it might be that he's the one who exits. I think he's a bit better suited to this system than Xerxes, who is better at dropping in deep and has played the 10 role a couple of times last season. Højlund, though, obviously question marks about his development. I feel very sorry for him that when we signed him, he spoke about this a bit in recent days, where he said when he came in, Anthony Martial was there, but then he got injured straight away. So Højlund had to play all the minutes straight away. I don't think he was really ready for that, and he's had to shoulder that pressure. So coming on to that question of if we don't sign a nine, then it would be clear, I think, that Højlund stays. I think you would maybe see then a little bit of mixing it up where Højlund would probably play most games, but you might see situations like the other night a little bit more where Mbeumo might play nine, or something like a fluid mix of those three players. But Højlund, I like and this is why I'm not set on, I'd rather us prioritise signing other players. And I said this from the beginning of the window, that if we signed Cunha and Mbeumo, that should take the pressure off Højlund a little bit in terms of the goal contributions. And I think, almost like what I was saying before about Cunha, in terms of the profile that he brings and him being able to open up space in behind, I think that it will be a better dynamic with what Højlund offers. So if we don't sign a nine, I mean, I'm not saying to people to go out and bring Højlund into their FPL teams, but he could become an option at some point. Because
you couldn't now, though.
No way. Of course, yeah.
You know what I think is going to happen? Because I told you off camera, and you've heard me say it in the past. I think you'll end up with Nicholas Jackson.
I would be surprised. I would think it's a more likely scenario than that for me would be Jackson ends up at Villa and Watkins comes to United. It seemed like the reports about a week ago were that we had pretty much narrowed our shortlist down to Sesko and Watkins. It's gone very quiet on Watkins, and it's very clear that Villa don't want to sell, and certainly if they would need a replacement if they're going to sell. But I feel Watkins would be more likely if we don't get Sesko.
I don't think you get Sesko. You know why I think Jackson will happen. I think I've long held the belief that Garnacho going to Chelsea just feels so blindingly obvious. And I think there's probably a deal to be done that suits all parties, where maybe one club plays a little bit more than what the valuation is for one, and the other club plays a little bit more than what the valuation is for the other, and it gets amortized, and everyone wins, and you get a new number nine, and they get another winger because they're not sure of them. I just can see Garnacho at Chelsea, and something goes the other way.
Isn't there a little bit of three-way love that could happen there, though, where Jackson goes to Villa, Watkins comes to United, and Garnacho goes to Chelsea?
I don't see Jackson at Villa. I don't see that. If Villa had been in the Champions, I'd say yeah, but I think Jackson will want to stay at that level, or I know that you're not in it, but the prestige of playing for your club is different.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I just think with Jackson, it's gone so quiet. I'd seen like murmurs of it before. The impression I get is that he's just not the preferred profile for the club, and that the Chelsea's valuation is way off what we were considering. But yeah, who knows? If it gets to the last couple of days of the deadline and nothing has happened, it's the kind of thing that could happen.
I guess we could even land in a scenario here where there's a loan swap.
I guess so. But yeah, I mean, I know we're going to talk about the players that we need to shift, but I think we really need to be finding permanent solutions for as many of these players as possible.
Okay, let's start with Garnacho then. What do you foresee? Is there any way you can get integrated back in here?
I don't see any way. Garnacho, I'll be sad to see him. Of all the players who are going, a couple of seasons ago, I felt like his ceiling at United was incredibly high. You've got to remember, he only turned 21 last month. And he was a big part of the two or three trophies that we won under Ten Hag, even though obviously that was a difficult time for United as well. Um, I think what he has achieved and his output at his age is maybe being overlooked a little bit. I mean, we're seeing Tyler Dibbling moving for to Everton for 50 million is being reported. So if that's the case, what's a 21-year-old Garnacho worth?
Yeah, but it's a 21 Garnacho that you've told everyone you want to sell.
And that's the problem. But at the
Mm.
same time, I don't think we should be really entertaining selling someone like him off on the cheap. We've put ourselves in this situation, and maybe we do lose value as a result of that. But it can't be. It can't be something ridiculous. We need to be getting something that, and maybe the way that works is if there's some kind of PSR wrangling with Chelsea. But yeah, I don't see any way that he's reintegrated back into the side, more from a footballing perspective than him as a character, even because I as high as think his ceiling is, and I think he'll do very well wherever he goes. I just don't think he's suited to this way of playing. He doesn't really work in one of the 10 roles, and he hasn't been kind of reimagined as a wing back. So yeah, he doesn't fit in, and yeah, I don't think he's reintegrated.
Who else is on the hit list? Tyrone Malacia is one, isn't he?
Yes, I believe he has 1 year left on his contract. I had a look into it. I'm not too sure what the likely outcome of that is. Maybe something in his case will be sorted out much later on. Um,
Anthony.
Anthony is one where what we're hearing now is that Betis asking if they can loan him again. I apparently that the Saudi links have gone cold. But in Anthony's case, he's got 2 years on his contract. I think we need to be pushing for something permanent. Otherwise, next year his value would have gone down. He'll have 1 year left on his contract, and we'll have the same problem.
Jadon Sancho.
Well, he has only 1 year left on his contract. So the problem is that his salary demands seem to be preventing any kind of move. We're seeing now maybe Dortmund trying to loan him on the basis that I assume he would just end up leaving for free next year. Um, Again, no chance at all that he's reintegrated. Same with Anthony. But yeah, Sancho, I expect something will be worked out very late in the window, and perhaps we'll end up taking a much reduced fee for him, given that he's got 1 year left.
And a word on Marcus Rashford.
Very sad to see him go. I think he was on the threshold of greatness in terms of United, in terms of if he'd stayed for 3, 4 more seasons and rediscovered his form of that 21-22 season. You'd find him getting within United's top 10 all-time scorers. Manchester lad, he's been a big part of this last sort of generation, and I just wish him well. He really needs to do it at Barcelona because this is his one crack at a big club. If it doesn't work out, I think that's it for him, and we would need to again sort something out for him next year. But I wish him the best, and just sad to see him go.
Okay, let's do a roundup of some defensive assets. 4.5s. I guess your favourite from what you said so far would be Dorgu, would it?
He is the only Man United player who is currently in my own drafts and has been since the beginning. I think he is the most interesting defensive asset. I expect him to be first choice at left wing back. He might not play every single game. We have Diego Leon, who is an 18-year-old wing back who started the first game of preseason, although I think he will very much be a backup. But we have seen Diallo start the last game against Everton on the left side. But I think Dorgu will be preferred. I think he's very, very attacking. I think that we saw a bit of that last season. He was very raw when he first started, but towards the end of the season, in particular, we watched the first half of the game against Bilbao, the areas he was getting to, like taking shots in the box, just getting into very threatening, dangerous positions, and he's looked very, very much part of the attack in these preseason games. He got a goal and assist against Bournemouth, and I think like historically, Amorim at Sporting, it's tended to be that with the wing backs, it's been one higher up and one a bit more reserved. But I think, to me, these pre-seasons games, it looks a little bit more balanced, and there's been threat on both sides. So yeah, Dorgu. I mean, the thing with Dorgu is, if you're going to start with a Man United defensive asset, obviously the concern is those tougher fixtures, but there are options too. So I, for example, have Dorgu and Anderson. So if you've got players who've got decent fixtures, 1, 4, and 5, Anderson at Fulham is one. De Kuyper at Brighton has decent fixtures then. If you've got the risk appetite to go with a Bogle at Leeds or the Goodmanson there, then they've got good fixtures those weeks as well. So, I mean, I've got Dorgu and Anderson as kind of rotating.
Which one would you start in game week 2?
Oh, when we play against them, Dorgu. I'm going to go with the attacking threat and obviously a bit of Man United fan bias.
1-0 Fulham, Anderson locked in with DEFCONs to boot. I guess part of the debate here is I think, again, the game's evolving. If we'd have had these pricing without the change to the game, like, yeah, Dorgu, great. But I guess someone like Maguire at the same price, you just think of how he defends the penalty area. Could be someone who could be very good in terms of that area. And obviously, Lenny Yoro is going to develop as well. Any interest in those two versus Dorgu?
What I would say on Maguire, he would become very interesting if Delict picked up an injury, and we know that Delict has got a history of injuries, because those two I think are going to be competing for central centre back, the central centre back role. Delict, I am pretty sure is first choice there. He
Okay.
started. Delict, we'll talk about that in a moment. I think he's actually quite interesting at 5, but Maguire, that's what I'd look out for. Yoro, maybe is slightly more cemented in the side than Dorgu, as in I'd have less risk about his minutes. I think he's going to be clearly first choice. He's not so good on the defensive contributions, which is why he's 4.5. So if you're, again, a safer type manager who wants someone who's slightly more assured, then maybe. But for me, Dorgu is the clear pick at 4.5.
Just to come back on one, Luke Shaw, are we now just looking at this left-sided centre back?
Yeah, I think his days of playing as like a marauding left-sided wing back or full back are I still keep seeing people expecting him to play at left wing back. I don't think it's going to happen. He is looking fit now. It's the first time I think Amorim has been very careful with both him and Mount. And again, Shaw has started 3 of the 4 preseason games. And I expect him to start the first game of the season at left centre back, Shaw. But I don't. I think that Lisandro Martinez will be first choice there, and I don't see Shaw as an FPL asset.
Right. So there's a consequence to that as well. You're saying you think Shaw starts game week 1. I think Martinez is hoping to be back sort of around about the Manchester derby in game week 4. That's what I've read.
What I've
Um,
seen, yeah, sorry, go on.
no, I was just going to say the consequence is Aiden Heaven is not an option here at 4.0.
Well, yeah, firstly, Alessandro Martinez, that's correct. Apparently, he is training on grass and he's expected back after the international break. Whether he goes straight in the side is another question after the injury that he's had. Heaven is an interesting one. I don't think, if people are looking at that and thinking, is he going to be a 4.0 gem? I can't see it. You got to remember, he played less than 200 Premier League minutes last season. He did play 90 against Sociedad, and that was his standout. He was superb in that game. He has had a few minutes pre-season. I think he started one of the games, but he has shown a tendency to get caught out of position a bit. I don't see us starting both him and Dorgu against Saka on that side in game week 1. And maybe he gets the Burnley game in game week 3, but I certainly would not be counting on it.
Yeah, okay. I think anyway, with Martinez due back around about game week 4, unless you were of opinion, there will be some people actually aiming for a game week 3 bench boost. I don't know. You could think or know that he was going to start at this stage unless something happened to Luke Shaw, which unfortunately is not something we can rule out. Just briefly on these 5s then. So Matswari, Delit, obviously you're not going to start with Martinez. You mentioned quite like the idea of Delit.
Well, I think the point here is that, right, so Delict, from what I've seen, I've looked into DEFCON. I'll put a caveat on that I've been looking mainly at FB ref data, which I think is maybe slightly different from where FPL take it from, but it will give a good indication. Delict is pretty good for it. And I think so, and this goes to all the United assets. I think the one positive trend we did have last season was that I think our defensive data did improve over the season. Amorim was in charge for 27 games. There were only 5 games where we had an XGC of zero point 0.5 or less, and they were all in the last 9 games, so all in the final third of Amarin's games. And at the same time, you see, like, for example, Forest trending the opposite direction. And I listened to what Mark Sutherland said as well on the first day of pods.
You nearly
Now,
said black box then, didn't you? Which would have been
but
natural.
I mean, I'm seeing Murillo and Milenkovic in a lot of drafts, and I'd say look at those defensive trends. Like De Ligt at United for 0.5 cheaper in a side that is trending better in terms of the defensive underlyings. And I know there are caveats against how Forest ended the season, but I do think United will be more solid. And I think De Ligt will pick up defensive contributions. And I think maybe he's being overlooked a bit at 5.0. I think he's absolutely nailed. There were 18.
Wow, I think that's why people are overlooking, because I don't think people think he is. I wouldn't have said that.
Well, I'll give you the evidence there. There were 18 games under Amarim when he was available, and he started 17 of them. The only one he didn't start was a Sunday 2 p.m. kickoff when we played Thursday night, and he played 90 minutes. He started 3 of the 4 in pre-season. I don't see a world like when everyone's fit. I think he starts as the central centre back, and I think the preferred lineup will be De Ligt, Yoro, Martinez when everyone's fit. And I think he is a very, very good option at 5.0.
The lit Euro Martinez. Yeah, but strong paper. And obviously, it would help under that particular makeup, the little bit of central as well of the three.
Yes, we did see De Ligt and Martinez start. Sorry, De Ligt and Maguire starting some games together last season, but that was just a consequence of injuries.
Yeah.
We won't see that happen when we've got a fuller complement of players available.
Okay. Finally, goalkeepers. I think Emi Martinez cried in game week 37 and then was crying again in game week 38 after getting sent off at Old Trafford. I think most people thought he was going to you. Is there any sign of anything from a new goalkeeper perspective at the moment or not?
The name we're actually being linked with a lot more is a young goalkeeper at Royal Antwerp called Sene Lammens, 23 years old, played every minute in the Belgium Pro League last year. And I think the idea with him is that he would come in as initially a number 2, although if we do bring him in, I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes the number 1 very quickly. That is the strongest link I'm seeing at the moment. It's been mentioned by Romano quite a bit. The links with Martinez seem to have gone a little bit cold, although again, I think that's the kind of deal. If it's going to happen, it would happen very late in the window. There has been mention of Donnarumma. I would be staggered if that happened. It's a market opportunity, but it doesn't look like we're interested or would want to pay his wages. So I think from now, I think the likelihood is that we sign Lammens and that Anana will begin as the first choice.
Yeah, it feels like goalkeeper incoming might also be dependent on trying to move Anana on, and that seems to be the message. And him being injured at the moment is not helping. Or is he injured? Is he available for one?
He's back training, and the latest I saw, he gave an interview a couple of days ago, where he said he's hoping to be ready for the start of the season. There's I think maybe he won't be ready for game week 1, but certainly whatever I think our goalkeepers, safe to say, are a no-go FPL wise at the start of the season.
Yeah, fair. Okay, go on then. Let's have a predicted lineup for Arsenal game week 1.
I'll give you it with a couple of caveats. So I'm going to say Anana on the basis that hopefully he'll be ready. If it's not him, it could actually be Tom Heaton, but Anana is who I'll predict.
Hold on. Slow down, Alex, slow down, mate. Slow down. Hold on. You can't just drop that in. I've not got Tom Heaton on my fucking agenda here, mate. Even start over Binder, would he?
Possibly. I mean, I think there's been a little bit of talk.
Surely not.
There's been a little bit of talk among the United community. I mean, Binder, I think will be looking to move on. And maybe we've been putting them in the shop window a little bit in pre-season. Heaton has started a game in pre-season. Maybe it's slightly more likely than that Binder starts if Anana isn't fit. I would not be shocked if it's Tom Heaton, though.
Wow. Don't suppose anyone's diving into that for their bench boost, but thank you, mate. Anyway, continue.
Okay. The back 3, I think, so the first choice, obviously, Lissandro Martinez isn't going to be available. I think it will be De Ligt, Yoro on the right, and Luke Shaw, I expect, on the left for his experience. And also, I mean, Mazraoui has missed the last 3 games with injury. So He's training again. He may be an option. If Shaw doesn't start, I think it's more likely to be Mazraoui from what I said about Heaven before. So I'm going to say Dorgu on the left and Ahmad on the right, because I think they are our preferred, and I think Amarim will start with what is our sort of preferred wing back options. There is a chance that Diallo starts in place of one of them for something a little bit more dependable and maybe a little bit more solid. But I think it will be Dorgu and Ahmad. I would predict the central pair to be Casemiro and Fernandes, which is the same pair that started against Arsenal when we played them in March at Old Trafford. And then Cunha and Mbeumo, and pending no signing, Rasmus Højlund playing number 9.
Okay. Where do you think you finish?
Right, this is where we maybe go into delusion territory.
Treble, yeah.
I think our window of possibility is maybe anywhere between 10th and 4th. I think it's going to be I think you're going to see a very different Man United this season, and I don't see us finishing in the bottom half again. I'm going to predict 5th because I think that those 4 of Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City, and Chelsea, we're still going to be behind those. But I'm going to be very optimistic and predict 5th on the basis of not having European competition and our challengers for that 5th spot all being teams who have got that issue.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly reasonable, mate. I think because the Europa involvement, the way the season went, also injuries last season as well. It was a mess. Let's be honest, but it doesn't look a mess to me at the moment. And I think United playing once a week could be really, really dangerous. Actually, I don't actually disagree with that prediction. I'd probably have you the same. I just had one caveat on the top 4. Everyone thinks that'll be the top 4. Do you know what that means, don't you?
That it won't be.
It won't be.
I agree with that because when you see this is the time of season when you see everyone post their Premier League table predictions, and it's usually just pretty much the same as how it finished the season before, and that's just not how there will be one of those sides who has a difficult season, and yeah, it's that I mean that's the obvious prediction to give, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
No, of course it is. Like if you're asking me to predict my table, I put all of them in the top 4 as well. I completely agree. I just know from experience that when it's something that looks locked in like that, it's more often than not isn't. Something will change. So someone gets injuries in a squad or something. It's important for you, Alex, that you don't have that this season, mate. Brilliant debut. Thank you so much, mate. Anything you want to plug before we finish?
No, not really. I run a community called the Mediocre 64, which is kind of a multi-divisional FPL community. We have chats for each division. We have some spaces in our qualifier league. So if anyone's interested in that, just ping me a message. But the rest of the community spaces are full now. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much it.
Where can they ping you a message, Alex?
Oh yes, sorry. I am on X. My handle is FPL_Odyssey. I'm also over on Blue Sky under the similar handle, although I'm not so active on there. But yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Top man. Thank you so much, mate. Right, I'm off to record the next episode of Correspondent Week now. See if Benjamin Sesko might be going to Newcastle United instead. Next up on Correspondent Week is Simon Bibby. Thanks again, Alex. Be nice to each other, everyone. Cue music, please. Banchard.